State Capture Inquiry Chair and the Acting Chief Justice of South Africa, that's Raymond Zondo, has indicated, the Commission intends to apply to the High Court to extend its term to the end of February. The Commission had previously said that it would complete its report and deliver it to the President, that's Cyril Ramaphosa, at the end of this month. Meanwhile, former President Jacob Zuma has succeeded in his application to appeal a ruling sending him back to prison. For legal analysis on these issues now, let's bring in Advocate Modidima Mannya, who joins us via our video link. Advocate Mannya, great to see you again. It's lovely, as always, to have you on the program. Let's start with this issue of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry asking for an extension. I mean, the inquiry itself has cost the country around about R1 billion or so. Raymond Zondo saying that this particular extension will not require any additional funds, but given how much money has been spent, is it reasonable to expect the country to wait even longer for this report?
Yes, good morning. And I think the other side of the question would be, is it reasonable now to throw that R1 billion away if the Commission is not granted an extension to finalize its work? We've already incurred that expenditure. I think the purpose of this extension is to ensure that the Commission remains lawful, because the writing of the report is part of the work of the Commission. So it cannot perform that duty unless it's still in force. The courts have granted the previous extensions in circumstances where you would have thought they would have said no. So I don't think there will be a problem with the granting of this one.
Yeah. Interesting, the strategy that the inquiry is also taking by saying that they're going to release this report in 3 parts, so to speak, part 1, part 2, part 3. The first 2 parts are told by some kind of interim version of the report itself. I mean, we're already waiting for quite a long time. Does this strategy make sense to you?
Look, I think the report on its own is going to be quite voluminous. But I'm not sure why everyone seems to think it is the Commission that created a problem, as opposed to the fact that in many instances the postponements of the Commission had nothing to do with the Commission itself, but partly lack of cooperation and probably in some instances having to obtain extensions and additional resources. I think the idea of the various reports, you could easily, in the light of the fact that they will simultaneously submit the final report, you could really call it chapters. Whatever interim means would not necessarily have any impact. And it would make a difference if they were to issue an interim report and 6 months later submit a final report.
Yeah. That statement from the inquiry also mentioning that the Deputy Chief Justice has already spoken to the President, who seems to be on board with the granting of this extension. With that in mind, I guess we can pretty much presume that it's a far-gone conclusion that the High Court will also grant what the Commission is asking for.
Yes, it needs the Commission to, the court, to actually authorize the extension of the life of the Commission until they are able to submit the final report.
Yeah. The report itself, though, is still one that people are anticipating with great caution. And that's because it's missing the voice of the former President Jacob Zuma, who we now know is also back and forth with the courts because he actually refused to appear before the inquiry itself. Do you agree with individuals who are saying that this report is kind of doomed before it's even released, because the man who's arguably at the center of what we heard at the inquiry itself has refused to comply with the Commission?
Well, I think it's a very dangerous proposition to go in that direction. There's no doubt that former President Zuma would be central to the issue of the state capture. In fact, this whole commission was triggered by his own conduct. But to suggest that the capture of the state is solely the making and responsibility of former President Zuma is a bit delusional. I mean, there are quite a number of people at various levels within and outside of government who have been very instrumental in collapsing the state, some in very invisible circumstances. So to simply say because his voice is not there, it means this is doomed to fail, suggests that this whole thing was set up about him, but former President Zuma is not the state. The state is the abstract entity. There could be issues that relate to parliament. There could be issues that relate to the judiciary. As you know, there were also allegations made about some members of the judiciary. The civil society was involved. The private sector was very much involved. If you remember, one of the key families, the Gupta family's voice, is not there in the report. But of course, they have been implicated. So is President Zuma and other people. Remember, there are other people as well who appeared before the commission and could not remember. They have been implicated. And the final report of the commission is not the end game. The end game will be when the law enforcement agencies looks at how, and the government, how it pursues these issues. The one important part of the commission is to really formulate a way of preventing the recurrence of this thing. Another part would be probably prosecutions. Another one would be probably trying to recover money, as the SIU is doing now. So I think to locate this solely on President Zuma is completely unfair and unacceptable.
Yeah. Speaking about the president, the former president that is, and what is and isn't fair, interesting remarks made by Judge Matojane yesterday as he granted the former president leave to appeal that ruling which overturned his medical parole. I mean, what Judge Matojane was gesturing at is another court may see his position in a different light and actually exercise a whole lot more compassion than perhaps the High Court in Pretoria has. Is that fair? Look,
and I think this is what probably the debate about this whole issue is. It comes at various levels. One of the toxins in this whole thing is that we have a former head of state, and we shouldn't be debating his refusal to appear before the State Capture Commission. We shouldn't be debating his failure or refusal to comply with a constitutional court order. We shouldn't be debating that he should go to prison for that type of thing. I think that is the first part of the problem that we have. The second part of the problem is that because there's a former head of state involved, there are all manner of risks that there is some preference, there's some inequality in dealing with these issues. As a matter of fact, and I've said this repeatedly, that just about 10 days ago, an 81-year-old was sentenced to 15 years in prison by the Secunda Regional Court. And you can't say that court lacks compassion. And I think this whole issue is going to raise a fundamental question, because it's not as if the courts have not been compassionate when they sentence people. But the question is going to be, how do we then deal with all other people who deserve this type of compassion, and hoping that that compassion will be clearly defined?
The silver lining, according to some people who are also watching this quite closely, is that this the granting of leave to appeal for the former president may actually give us an opportunity to give more clarity to the grounds under which anyone may be granted medical parole. Something like that. Is that a sentiment you share?
You know, let me remind you that around 2009, 2010, there was a review of the medical parole system, because at that point there was a view that there were a lot of shortcomings in the system. And I think Judge Desire headed the review committee. And this brought about this new dispensation that we have. And hardly the ink has dried. We still have a problem of uncertainty around what this means. And it may be as well be that we are going to be uncertain for a very long time, because remember, the Supreme Court of Appeal is going to deal with this particular case with its own facts and surrounding circumstances. It's not going to rewrite the law. It's simply going to interpret it based on the facts of this case. So we may be heading for more serious uncertainty.
Yeah. I don't mean to conflate issues, but whilst I have you here, I might as well get your take on this as well, Advocate. I mean, we also know that the country is kind of waiting with bated breath to find out who the next Chief Justice is. Given what's taken place in the last couple of months, what do you reckon Raymond Zondo's chances are?
Well, I think it's even less about what Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice chances are. I think we have seen him being attacked for doing what we appointed him to do. We have seen the judiciary come under immense pressure. Even in this present case of former President Zuma, if you listen to the things that are being said out there by political leaders or people who are closely associated with this issue, you will see that we are on a slippery slope. Maybe let me say to you that the expectation that I see, or my own sense, is that the day the process starts for the interviews, we will hear vicious attacks on Deputy Chief Justice Zondo. And probably any other candidate could be subjected to that attack. He has already been accused of a lot of things. Now, the difficulty is we are then on a slippery rope because over a period of time now, the judiciary has come under immense attack. The concept of separation of powers still retains the judiciary as the final arbiter of our disputes. And the day that arm of the state collapses, we should not be surprised if we go the route of Zimbabwe, if we go to the route of Zambia, if we go to the route of Lesotho. You might have noticed what is happening in Botswana now with the former President Ian Khama and the arrest there and the allegations and counter-allegations. And it is in the face of this type of challenges that we need a solid judiciary. But I'm starting to get worried that our judiciary authority continues to be eroded, it continues to be attacked, and therefore our constitution has become vulnerable.
Advocate Modidima Mannya, a legal analyst, sir. Always great chatting to you. Thanks very much indeed for your time.